The day my husband Thomas Hart died, I still had his coffee cup on the kitchen counter. It was half full, cold and forgotten, just like the future he promised me. We had been married for 23 years, long enough to build a life, long enough to believe in safety, long enough to think I was part of a family. My name is Eleanor Hart. I am 62 years old. And 3 days after Thomas was buried, his sons came to take everything. Ryan and Lucas arrived without warning, not with flowers, not with sympathy. They walked straight into Thomas's home office like they owned it, the same room where he used to read the morning news, the same desk where he once held my hand when he told me he was afraid of getting sick. Ryan was the older one, tall, confident, always dressed like a man who expected the world to bend for him. Lucas stood beside him, quieter but just as watchful. Their eyes were not filled with grief, they were filled with calculation. Ryan said, using my name like it was a formality, "We need to talk about the estate." The word estate hit me harder than any condolence. My husband was not even cold in the ground, and they were already dividing his life. Like inventory, Lucas added, "We know this is a hard time, but there are legal matters that need to be handled right away." I looked at them standing in Thomas's office, breathing the air of a house they had never helped maintain. They had not been there during the long hospital nights. They had not sat beside Thomas when the doctors spoke in quiet voices. They had not held his hand when he whispered that he was scared. But here they were, now ready to claim what they believed was theirs. "What legal matters?" I asked. Ryan opened a folder and laid it on my husband's desk. Inside were documents that looked heavy with authority. According to Dodd's will, the primary residence, the lake house, and the business assets go to Lucas and me. My heart skipped our home in the house. Thomas and I shared the place where we had laughed, argued, and planned the rest of our lives in me. I asked. Lucas shifted slightly. "There is a life insurance policy for you, 200,000. 200,000 for a woman who had given up her career to support a family that never truly saw her." That was the moment I understood something terrible. They did not see me as Thomas's wife, they saw me as an obstacle, and they were ready to remove me. For a few seconds after Lucas spoke, I could not find my voice. 200,000 sounded like a large number until I compared it to the life I was about to lose. Ryan leaned against Thomas's desk as if he already owned it. "The house you are sitting in is valued at about 900,000, he said. "The lake house is worth around 700,000. The company brings in steady revenue. Dad wanted all of that to stay in the family." "The family, not me," I nodded slowly, trying to stay calm. "And where am I supposed to live?" I asked. "You have 30 days, Ryan replied without hesitation. "That should be enough time to make arrangements. 30 days to pack up 23 years of memories. 30 days to find a new home, move my belongings, and somehow grieve at the same time." Lucas added, "We are not trying to be unkind, Eleanor, but I always believed that blood matters when it comes to legacy, but matters as if love, loyalty, and years of sacrifice meant nothing." I thought about the way Thomas used to hold my hand in the evenings when we sat on the couch. I thought about how he used to call me his anchor, and now his sons were telling me I was worth less than a small insurance policy. "There is also something else," Ryan said, his tone shifting. "During Dad's illness, he accumulated medical bills. Insurance covered most of it, but there is still about 180,000 outstanding." My chest tightened. "That is almost all the insurance money." "Those bills are your responsibility," Lucas said softly. "You were his wife. You made decisions together legally. The hospital will come after you. So let me get this straight," I said. "You take the houses, you take the company. You take the future Thomas and I built, and I take the debt." Ryan did not deny it. "That is how the will is written." I looked around the office one last time. The shelves, the window, the picture of Thomas and me on our wedding day. They were not just taking property, they were erasing me. And the worst part was not even the money. It was the way they stood there, calm and polite, while they destroyed my life, as if it were nothing more than paperwork. That afternoon, I sat across from Mark Delaney, the lawyer Thomas had trusted for years. His office was quiet, filled with framed certificates and shelves of thick law books that smelled faintly of dust and ink. "Eleanor," he said gently, "you do not have to accept this. The will they showed you can be challenged." I looked at him, exhausted. "On what grounds?" "There are serious irregularities," Mark replied. "Thomas made changes shortly before he died. We can argue that he was under pressure or not fully informed. We can slow everything down and force Ryan and Lucas to negotiate. Slow everything down." The words felt heavy. How long would that take? I asked. Months, at least, possibly years. And what do I live on during that time? Mark hesitated. You would still receive the insurance money, but the medical bills could wipe most of that out before the case is resolved. So I would be broke, stressed, and fighting two men who have no problem crushing me. Mark leaned forward. Eleanor, they are counting on you being too tired and too scared to fight back. That is how people like Ryan and Lucas win. I stared at my hands. They looked older than they used to. Thomas always promised me I would be safe. I said quietly that I would never have to worry about money. Mark nodded. That is why this makes no sense. This will does not sound like Thomas. What if I do not fight? I asked. You mean you would just sign everything over? What if I let them have what they think they want? Eleanor, how fast could it be done? I closed my eyes. Fighting would drain what little strength I had left. But giving up felt like stepping into a dark room without knowing what was inside. I am not weak, I said softly. I am just tired of being treated like I am nothing. Mark looked at me with concern. I think you are making a mistake. Maybe, I replied, but it is a mistake. I am choosing that night. I sat alone in the living room, surrounded by the quiet that Thomas used still fill. Every sound felt louder. Without him, the ticking of the clock, the hum of the refrigerator, my own breathing. I thought about fighting, about standing in court while Ryan and Lucas watched me with those cold eyes. I imagined months of lawyers' hearings and whispered judgments about the greedy stepmother who wanted more than her share. I did not have the strength for that kind of war, so I made a different choice. I called Mark Delaney the next morning and told him I was ready to sign whatever papers Ryan and Lucas needed. He tried to talk me out of it again. I let him, but my mind was already made up. They think I am surrendering, I told him. Let them believe that grief does strange things to people. It makes you look weak. It makes others think they can step over you. Ryan and Lucas had already decided I was beaten. But what they did not know was that I was done asking for fairness. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one who sees everything. When I hung up the phone, I walked into Thomas's office one last time. The smell of his cologne still lingered. His chair was still slightly turned, as if he had just stepped away. I rested my hand on his desk. You always told me to trust my instincts, I whispered. As if in answer, my fingers brushed against something inside the small drawer, a tiny brass key. I picked it up and turned it over in my palm. It was old, worn, important, and in that moment I knew. Thomas had not left me empty-handed. He had left me a door. The key did not belong to any lock in the house. I tried every cabinet, every drawer, every storage room. It fit nowhere. Yet Thomas had hidden it in the one place he kept only the things that mattered, that made it different. I slipped it into my pocket and went about my day, pretending I was just another grieving widow packing up her life. Ryan and Lucas called twice to ask if I had spoken to Mark. Their voices were polite but rushed. They wanted this done quickly. That alone made me uneasy. Thomas had never rushed anything that involved money outside the house that night. I sat in the kitchen, turning the key between my fingers. It felt heavier than it should have been. What did you leave me, Thomas? I whispered. The next morning I found the answer by accident. I was sorting through Thomas's wallet, the one the hospital had returned to me in a sealed bag. Behind his driver's license was a small card I had never seen before. Earth's National Bank was printed on it in simple black letters. On the back, in Thomas's handwriting, was one number. 379. I stared at it for a long time. Then I looked at the key in my hand, a safety deposit box. My heart began to pound. Thomas had never mentioned a box, never mentioned anything hidden, and yet here it was, something he had not trusted anyone else with, not even his sons. I grabbed my purse and my coat and drove to the bank before Dow could stop me. I did not tell Ryan, I did not tell Lucas. For the first time since Thomas died, something inside me felt awake. The bank was quiet in the early morning, the kind of quiet that makes you feel like every sound matters. A woman at the front desk looked up when I gave her Thomas's name and the number 379. Her expression softened. Mr. Hart was here often, she said. Please follow me. She led me down a narrow hallway and into a vault that smelled faintly of metal and cold air. Rows of steel boxers lined the walls like silent witnesses. Only you and your husband were listed on this box, she added. He opened it about 6 months ago. 6 months ago, right when Thomas started getting sick. The box was heavier than I expected. She placed it in a small private room and left me alone. My hands were shaking when I lifted the lid. Inside were folders, letters, bank statements, photographs, everything neatly arranged like Thomas had prepared it for me. I picked up a bank statement first. It was for an account called Hart Holdings. The balance made my breath catch for pointy. 7 million, a handwritten note on it in Thomas's familiar script to Eleanor. This is our real savings. I moved it so the boys could not touch it. Tears blurred my vision. We were not broke. We were not helpless. Thomas had been protecting me. I opened another folder and felt my stomach drop. It contained emails between Ryan and someone I did not know. The messages were cold and calculating. Dad is getting worse. Ryan had written, we need to move the assets before she figures anything out. The reply was worse. Once he signs, everything will be under the new companies. The wife will not understand what happened until it is too late. They had been planning this while Thomas was dying. The next folder held photographs: Ryan walking into a casino, Lucas meeting with men in dark suits, financial records showing massive debts and failed investments, and then I saw it, another will. This one dated just weeks before Thomas died. This one left everything to me. My hands pressed against the table to keep from falling. They were using the wrong will. The one they showed me was not the last one Tom had signed. He had outsmarted them, and he had left me the proof. At the bottom of the box was a letter in Tomad's handwriting. It was sealed in an envelope with my name on it. I opened it after I had read everything else. My hands trembled as I unfolded the paper. My dearest Eleanor, it began. If you are reading this, then I am gone, and the boys have shown you who they really are. He wrote about how Ryan and Lucas suddenly became attentive when his health declined, how they asked strange questions about bank accounts and property titles, how their concern did not feel like love but like fear of losing control. So I hired an investigator. He wrote, I needed to know the truth. The truth was worse than I imagined. Ryan was using the business as collateral for gambling debts. Lucas was moving money from clients into secret accounts. They were not just greedy, they were dangerous. Thomas explained how he moved the money into Hart Holdings, how he changed his will, and how he placed everything in that box for me to find. The houses, he wrote, are not gifts. I mortgaged them heavily. If the boys take them, they take the debt to the final. Lines of his letter made my chest ache. I am sorry I could not tell you while I was alive. I did not want to put you in danger, but I needed you to be safe when I was gone. I have given you the choice. Eleanor, do what you think is right. For the first time since Thomas died, I felt something close to peace. It had not abandoned me. He had been standing beside me the whole time. That evening, Ryan invited me to dinner at his house. Lucas and his wife would be there too. He said it would be nice to spend time together as a family before everything was finalized. I almost laughed. They sat across from me at a table set with expensive plates and wine they probably could not afford. They smiled. They asked how I was holding up. They spoke as if they cared. Ryan talked about renovating the lake house. Lucas mentioned selling the company. They were already spending what they thought was theirs. I nodded and sipped my water, thinking about the files in the safety deposit box. At one point I mentioned the key I had found in Thomas's desk. Ryan froze for half a second. Lucas's fork stopped me. Dear, a safety deposit box, I said casually. Strange, isn't it? Ryan forced a smile. Dad always liked to hide things. I thought maybe I should check it before we sign anything, I added. Lucas cleared his throat. That might not be necessary. We do not want you to get confused by paperwork. Thomas always said I was smarter than people thought. They did not laugh as dessert was served. I realized they were afraid, and fear told me I was exactly where Thomas wanted me to be. The next morning we met at Mark Delaney's office. Brian and Lucas sat on one side of the table. Their lawyer was beside them. I sat across with Victor Lane. They tried to control the room. From the first second there has been a misunderstanding, Ryan said. Someone is claiming there is another will. Victor calmly opened his briefcase, not claiming producing. He slid documents across the table. The real will, the bank records, the mortgage file, and Mark stared at the pages. These were not in my file. That is because Thomas fired your firm, Victor said quietly. He did not trust anyone who shared information with his sons. Lucas went pale. Ryan slammed his hand on the table. This is fraud. No, Victor replied. What you did was fraud. He turned to the mortgage documents. The house you think you are inheriting has a loan of $1.2 million against it. Ryan laughed nervously. That is impossible neither, Victor said. The lake property has 800,000 in debt. Tomas made sure of that. Ryan's voice cracked. You set us up. No, I said calmly. You set yourselves up when you tried to steal from your father, Victor added. You can accept this inheritance so you can walk away, or you can go to prison. Ryan looked at Lucas. Lucas looked at the floor. They signed because fear is louder than pride. 3 months later, the houses were gone. Ryan could not refinance the loans, neither could Lucas. The banks took both properties and still came after them for what was left unpaid. Ryan filed for bankruptcy. His gambling problem was no longer a secret. The court ordered him into treatment. His law license was suspended. Lucas lost what was left of his business, the climbs he had cheated, pressed charges. He took a job managing night shifts at a hotel near the airport. Their world collapsed exactly as fast as they had tried to take mine. No more luxury cars, no more expensive dinners, no more pretending. Bianca laughed. She said she did not marry a man who could not pay his own bills. They tried to call me. I did not answer. Thomas had given me peace, and they had given themselves ruin. They first sold the remaining shares of Thomas's investments and moved to a small coastal town where the ocean met the sky. My new house was not large, but it was mine. No memories of tension, no footsteps that reminded me of betrayal. I planted a garden in the backyard, roses, lavender, herbs. Every plant felt like a small promise that something new could grow after everything had been burned down. For the first time in decades, I woke up without anxiety in my chest. No one was watching me. No one was waiting for me to fail. I took painting classes at the community center I volunteered at, a local shelter. I learned how to enjoy quiet mornings with coffee and the sound of waves. Thomas had not just left me money, he had left me freedom. And freedom feels like breathing after being underwater for years. I was no longer the woman Ryan and Lucas dismissed. I was simply Eleanor, and that was enough. If there is one thing this story taught me, it is this. Never mistake silence for weakness. Ryan and Lucas believed I was small because I did not scream. They believed I was powerless because I did not fight in the way they expected. But quiet people see more and they remember more. If you are listening to this and you feel trapped by family, by a partner, or by people who treat you like you do not matter, remember this: you do not need to be loud to be strong. You need to be patient, you need to be observant, and when the time is right, you need to choose yourself. Thomas gave me the tools, but I gave myself the courage to use them, and that made all the difference. The day after I settled into the small coastal town, I woke to the sound of waves hitting the shore. The air smelled of salt and freedom. It was the first morning in months. I did not wake up with tension clawing at my chest. I made coffee and sat on the porch watching the ocean. Thomas had always said there is clarity in water, a place to think without judgment. I thought about the ledger, the files and letters hidden in the bank. I thought about Ryan and Lucas and the ruin they had brought upon themselves, and I smiled quietly to myself, not out of revenge but out of understanding. Thomas had never wanted me to fight in anger. He wanted me to fight smart. I opened one of the folders from Hard Holdings. Once again, the pages were neat and precise: bank transfers hidden under shell companies, letters showing manipulation and greed, emails that proved Ryan and Lucas were willing to betray their own father for money and status. It made me feel sick, but it also made me feel alive, because I now knew the scale of what Thomas had protected me from. That afternoon, Margaret arrived. She had come to check on me and to go over the files. We sat at my kitchen table with sunlight spilling across the papers. Her eyes scanned every page. She looked at me and said, "Eleanor, you are ready." I nodded. I did not feel ready. I felt stronger. We both knew what that meant. The next steps were delicate. We could not move too quickly, but we could not wait either. Victor called later that evening. He had reviewed all the files and confirmed their authenticity. Every signature, every note, every account traced back to Thomas. Every plan had been documented in detail. Ryan and Lucas had assumed the wrong will gave them temporary advantage, but Thomas had planned for their greed and impatience. He had mapped it all out. Margaret leaned back in her chair. "You are about to step into a world they thought you could never survive." I looked out the window at the ocean. I thought about Thomas. I thought about the key in his desk and the safety deposit box. I thought about months of grief and uncertainty, and I realized I was ready, not for the battle but for the consequence, because this was not about revenge anymore. It was about justice. And sometimes justice is quiet, patient, and invisible until it lands the next day. I received a message from an unknown number, but it was short. They wanted me to meet someone claiming to represent interests that would prefer stability. They were polite in tone, but there was no mistaking the threat. They wanted me to comply or risk exposure. I showed Margaret the message. She read it carefully and said, "Eleanor, they are trying to scare you. But they do not know what you have." We stayed silent for a moment, then she added, "This is the first step. Thomas protected you, but now you protect yourself." That night I slept lightly. I dreamed of Thomas standing beside me, smiling quietly. It was a reminder that he had given me the tools. I just had to use them. The following morning, we arranged a meeting at a downtown office. No signage, no windows, just glass and steel. The man waiting for us was not Calder. He was younger, sharper, and smiling. He extended a hand. "Ms. Hart," he said, "I represent interests that would prefer stability." I did not shake it. "Who is this for?" I asked. "Stability for everyone," he replied. "We have information that could be inconvenient. It could disrupt many things, including your own life." I folded my hands and, "What do you want from me?" He smiled. "We are prepared to make this worth your while, financially, legally, personally. And if I decline, then things become inefficient." I looked at Margaret. She nodded slightly. "Threats do not age well," she said. I did not flinch. "I am not afraid of threats," I replied. He adjusted in his seat. "Neither do we," he said. The meeting ended without agreement. We left the office with more clarity than fear. Outside, Margaret exhaled. "They are trying to protect themselves," she said. "Not Calder." I nodded. The ledger, the files, and Thomas's planning had put me in a position they could not predict. And that is when I understood the story was no longer about surviving Thomas's death. It was about exposing a world built on greed and manipulation. And I was at the center of it for the next few days. The pressure intensified. Small things first. An audit, letters from unknown lawyers, zoning complaints, Ryan and Lucas calling incessantly, hoping for my compliance. But I did not respond. I let them believe they were in control, let them think I was weak. They had already underestimated me. The ledger, Hart Holdings, and Thomas's instructions were my shield and my sword. Margaret and Victor worked in silence. We mapped each move, each potential threat, each misstep from Ryan and Lucas. The more we learned, the more I realized Thomas had built a fortress around me, invisible and indestructible if used correctly. That evening, another message arrived. "Unknown number, you have something." They wanted to intimidate me, make me feel small, but I understood for the first time the truth was in my hands, not theirs, not Calder's, not anyone else. I did not answer. Margaret advised patience. She reminded me that the moment of action was coming, but it had to be precise early. The next morning I drove to the small bank again to check the safety deposit box. Everything was intact. Unopened files carefully stored. I double-checked the ledgers and letters, ensuring nothing was missing, nothing had been compromised. Then Victor called. He had discovered evidence that Ryan and Lucas had accelerated plans to seize the remaining assets. They were reckless, greedy, and desperate, and desperation makes mistakes. That afternoon we met at a secluded location to strategize, Margaret, Victor, and I. I looked at the documents again, every shell company, every bank transfer, every note Thomas had left meticulously recorded. It was overwhelming, but I felt calm, the calm of someone who finally understood the landscape. The next day Ryan called from a burner phone. They wanted me to lie about the ledger, about Thomas, about what I knew. They thought fear could manipulate me. I typed back slowly. "Don't." They paused. I typed again. "If I do not lie, I disappear." The next words appeared immediately in my mind. I understood we would not disappear if we were careful. They would vanish instead. If they lied, if they tried to cheat, the truth would come crashing down, and when the ledger was revealed, it would be undeniable. That night we monitored media reports. Selective leaks started appearing about the estate, about alleged misconduct. By morning, Ryan had agreed to cooperate with authorities. The public did not know the details, but the implication was clear. Something had shifted. They were no longer in control. I realized then Thomas had not just protected me financially. He had protected me legally and strategically. He had anticipated every move and every betrayal. Even Calder could not touch me without himself. The calm I felt was deceptive because this was only the beginning. The ledger was a weapon, but it required restraint, discipline, and patience. Every misstep could turn the tide, every reaction could escalate consequences. The following week, Victor delivered news that confirmed everything. We were ready. The public and private mechanisms had aligned. The evidence was irrefutable. I had control, not because I was aggressive, but because I had waited. Thomas had prepared this long before. He died, and now it was my turn to act. The day of confrontation arrived without warning or fanfare. It was quiet but heavy. I met with Victor and Margaret early at a small office. We reviewed the files one last time. Every bank transfer, every email, every photograph meticulously organized. We were ready. Ryan and Lucas thought they had control. They believed fear and compliance would bend me to their will. They were wrong. I walked into the room where their lawyers and the brothers waited, calm, collected, and fully aware of every detail. They tried to dominate the conversation from the first second, but I did not flinch. Victor placed the documents in front of me. The real will, the bank records, mortgage filings, everything was there. Silence fell across the room. Ryan tried to claim. Broad Lucas stuttered. They did not expect authenticity. They did not expect proof. Victor calmly explained. Every signature, every note, every account could be traced directly to Thomas. The properties, the houses, the lake house, everything transferred. According to Thomas's final wishes, Ryan's face went pale. The color drained from Lucas's cheeks. They had counted on deceit. They had counted on mistakes, but Thomas had anticipated them, and now they faced the consequences. The lawyers tried to negotiate, but it was too late. The ledger was unassailable. The evidence of Ryan's gambling, Lucas's embezzlement and manipulation could not be ignored. Victor explained the fine print. The houses in the lake house, transferred to them with existing mortgages. Intact, they were receiving everything they wanted, but along with the debt, Thomas had mortgaged everything intentionally to protect me. They had set themselves up. Their greed had created their own trap. The room was tense. Ryan looked at Lucas. Lucas looked at the floor. Neither could hide the fear in their eyes. I remained calm, not a word of gloating, not a single expression of triumph. I simply observed the outcome was inevitable. The properties would be lost. Ryan would face bankruptcy. Lucas would lose his business. Clients would press charges. They had built a world on greed and deceit, and now it was crumbling. Exactly as quickly as they had tried to take mine. Margaret and Victor watched silently as the brothers signed the documents. Fear louder than pride had forced their hands for the first time. They understood that actions have consequences, that every betrayal leaves a mark. The next few months were quiet for me. I moved fully into my coastal home, spending mornings with coffee and the sound of waves. I planted my garden, roses, lavender, herbs, every plant a symbol of resilience. Every bloom a reminder that life continues. Thomas had left me freedom and the ability to rebuild. I painted, I volunteered, I lived without fear, without anxiety. For the first time in decades, Ryan and Lucas faded from my life. Their calls went unanswered. Their world collapsed. They were forced to confront the consequences of choices made in greed. Their suffering was not my pleasure. It was the natural order of cause and effect. I had learned to be patient, to observe, and to act when the time was right. And that made all the difference. The quiet mornings became my sanctuary. I would sit on the porch with a cup of coffee, listening to the waves. Thomas had always said, the ocean teaches patience and perspective. I thought about the years of betrayal and manipulation and how close I had come to surrendering, but surrender was never truly an option. The ledger, the safety deposit box, the letters and files had given me more than protection. They had given me clarity. I began exploring ways to rebuild my life, not just financially, but emotionally. I took painting classes at the community center, finding solace in color and shape. I volunteered at a local shelter, helping those who had no one. Watching the world through empathy rather than fear became my daily practice. One afternoon, Margaret called. She had information. Calder was still moving in the shadows. He was testing boundaries, looking for weak points, but he did not know I had anticipated every step. Thomas had prepared for him as well. As we spoke, Victor joined in providing details of accounts that Calder had tried to access. The trail was clear. His reach was limited. I realized then the power of preparation. Thomas had not just protected my assets. He had protected me from people who would use my grief against me. I spent evenings reviewing the ledger and letters. The level of foresight Thomas had employed was staggering. Each shell company, each note, each transfer accounted for multiple contingencies. I felt a wave of gratitude and sorrow all at once. It was a reminder that love is often silent, but its protection can be profound. Ryan and Lucas were no longer a threat, but Calder still lingered in the periphery. I could feel the tension in the market, the legal threats, the whispers in offices. I chose to act with patience. Every phone call, every meeting carefully orchestrated. I met with Victor and Margaret, regularly mapping out strategies to ensure no misstep could harm me. The more I learned, the more I realized how many people had underestimated the quiet ones. The observant ones, the patient ones, the ones who refused to be broken by grief or fear. And then came the day Ryan attempted to manipulate the press to his advantage. He sought to twist the story, to paint himself as a victim of circumstance, to manipulate public perception. I anticipated it. I had already prepared statements and evidence ready for release. The moment came. I allowed the evidence to speak for itself. Every ledger, email, photograph, and letter was made public in a controlled manner. The narrative shifted instantly. Ryan and Lucas were exposed for what they truly were. The public saw the greed, the manipulation, and the betrayal. I remained untouched. Not a word I spoke, not a reaction I gave. The world saw truth unfold without interference. I realized then the power of quiet patience. Observation is more powerful than confrontation, silence more effective than aggression. Every calculated move I had made was guided by the trust Thomas had left in me. The ledger was not just financial protection, it was a blueprint for strategy, for survival, for eventual justice. And as I watched the public unfold the truth, I felt an unexpected peace, the kind that comes not from revenge but from understanding and resolution. The brothers faced the consequences of their actions. Calder retreated into the shadows. Realizing his leverage had been neutralized, the world shifted back into balance, and I emerged unscathed but wiser. I had learned the lesson Thomas had always tried to teach me. Patience, observation, and careful action can turn weakness into strength and betrayal into clarity. The following weeks were quiet but purposeful. I began to rebuild my life fully in the coastal town. The garden I planted flourished. Roses, lavender, and herbs grew tall and strong, each plant a symbol of resilience and rebirth. I decorated the house simply but elegantly, creating a space of peace and comfort. I spent mornings walking along the shore, feeling the sand beneath my feet and the wind on my face. It was freedom in its purest form. Thomas had given me the tools and the protection, but I had claimed the courage to use them fully. I enrolled in a painting class that met twice a week there. I met others who shared stories of loss and triumph through colors and brushstrokes. I found healing. I volunteered at a local shelter, helping women who were rebuilding their lives. I saw my own reflection in their stories, and it strengthened me. Each act of kindness, each small success reminded me that life could be beautiful even after betrayal. The ledger and Thomas's instructions were never far from my mind. They had been the key to survival, but now they were the key to empowerment. I reviewed them occasionally, ensuring that nothing had been missed. Nothing could catch me unprepared. The more I prepared, the more I understood the depth of Thomas's foresight. Every risk, every threat had been considered, every possible betrayal anticipated. I had been given not just protection but insight and strategy. The brothers Ryan and Lucas tried to rebuild their lives as best they could, but the damage was irreversible. They had made choices fueled by greed and impatience, and the consequences were permanent. Their financial and legal troubles continued to mount, but I no longer thought about them. In anger, I observed the world. In clarity and peace, I received letters from friends and neighbors telling me how inspired they were by my story, by how I had endured and prevailed quietly, without spectacle, without drama. Their words reminded me that resilience is often silent but always powerful. Thomas had always believed in quiet strength, and I had finally embodied it. The months passed in a rhythm of work, reflection, and healing. I found new joys in painting, in gardening, in volunteering, in small moments of connection with people who mattered. I began to understand that survival is more than protection, it is growth. It is reclaiming the life that others tried to steal from you and building something new, something wholly your own. I wrote letters to Thomas in my mind, imagining him beside me, guiding me with quiet wisdom. He had never abandoned me, and in learning to act with patience and observation, I had discovered the power he had always trusted me with. The ledger was no longer a shield, but a symbol of strategy and foresight, and in that quiet confidence I realized that strength does not always roar. Sometimes it observes, waits, and strikes at the perfect moment. The world had taught me betrayal, but it had also taught me clarity and power. Over the next few months, I settled fully into my new life. Each day was a balance of reflection, work, and quiet enjoyment. I painted landscapes and portraits, capturing the beauty of the world around me. I spent hours tending to my garden, watching each plant grow and thrive. It was a meditation, a reminder that life continues even after loss. The ledger and Thomas's instructions remained a foundation. I checked them periodically, ensuring that nothing had been altered or compromised. Each file, each letter, each bank statement was a testament to his foresight and love. I began documenting my own experiences, writing down lessons I had learned about patience, observation, and strategy. I wanted to ensure that if others found themselves in similar situations, they could see that quiet strength can overcome greed and betrayal. Ryan and Lucas continued to struggle. I heard through news reports and legal filings of their ongoing financial and personal turmoil. Their actions had consequences, and those consequences were permanent. I did not gloat, nor did I seek revenge. I simply observed and reflected on how carefully Thomas had protected me. I spent time with Margaret and Victor, coordinating minor adjustments and monitoring any lingering risks. Every interaction with them reminded me that preparation and observation are more powerful than anger or confrontation. I joined a local community group and shared my story sparingly, focusing on resilience and strategy rather than drama. People were inspired by how I had endured and acted with patience and clarity. I realized then that my journey was no longer just about recovering from loss. It was about building a life rooted in strength, independence, and purpose. I received letters and messages from people who had witnessed the story or heard about it. They thanked me for demonstrating that even in the face of betrayal and greed, one could reclaim their life quietly and effectively. I spent mornings walking along the shore, reflecting on the ocean. The water reminded me of Thomas and his wisdom. It reminded me that life moves forward and that strength comes from understanding and preparation, not from force or aggression. I volunteered at the local shelter, teaching small classes on financial literacy and personal strategy. Helping others find confidence and stability became one of the most rewarding aspects of my life. I saw the impact of patience, observation, and preparation firsthand as the women in my classes learned to assert themselves wisely without confrontation. The days became months and the months became years. I continued to live quietly but deliberately. Each choice was informed by the lessons Thomas had left me and the experiences I had endured. Ryan and Lucas eventually faded from my world. Their attempts at manipulation and control left permanent marks on their lives, but they were no longer my concern. I had everything I needed. The ledger, the documents, and Thomas's foresight had ensured that I would remain secure financially, legally, and emotionally. I learned that strength is often invisible until revealed at the perfect moment, and that patience, observation, and strategy are more powerful than confrontation or force. The quietest person in the room often sees everything and acts at the right time, and I had learned to be that person. The final months in my coastal town were peaceful yet purposeful. I woke each morning with gratitude and clarity. I had survived betrayal, greed, and manipulation and emerged stronger than I ever imagined. The ledger and Thomas's instructions had given me protection and strategy, but it was my patience and observation that allowed me to act wisely. I continued painting, exploring new techniques, capturing the essence of the ocean, the sky, and the quiet strength I felt inside. I volunteered at the local shelter, helping women rebuild their lives, teaching them how to act with patience and intelligence in the face of adversity. Every day I observed the world, I listened carefully, and I acted only when necessary. Ryan and Lucas were shadows of their former selves. Their financial and legal struggles were ongoing. They had lost everything they had tried to take from me and more. The public knew the truth. Their greed, their deception, and their manipulation had been exposed. I no longer felt anger, only quiet understanding. They had set themselves up and they had paid the price. The coastal town became my sanctuary. I walked the shoreline, each day watching the waves. I tended my garden, painting letters to Thomas, in my mind reflecting on the lessons of patience and strategy. I realized that survival is not just about protection, it is about rebuilding life with intention and clarity. I had learned that the quietest person in the room often sees everything and acts at the perfect moment. Thomas had trusted me with tools of foresight and strategy, and I had honored that trust by acting wisely and deliberately. The freedom I felt was profound. I no longer needed to fight with force or confrontation. The world had revealed its truth and I had navigated it with grace and patience. My life was rebuilt with intention, strength, and independence. I had reclaimed everything Thomas had left me and more. I had reclaimed my peace, my dignity, and my freedom, and in that quiet clarity I understood the final lesson of all that had happened. Strength is not loud, it does not roar. Strength observes, waits, and acts at the perfect moment, and patience is the most powerful weapon of all. I continued to paint, volunteer, and enjoy the peaceful mornings with coffee and the sound of waves. I had learned that life could be rebuilt with patience, observation, and deliberate action, and that the quietest people are often the strongest. If there is one lesson from my story, it is this: never mistake silence for weakness. Ryan and Lucas believed I was small because I did not scream. They believed I was powerless because I did not fight in the way they expected. But quiet people see more and remember more. Patience, observation, and careful action can turn weakness into strength and betrayal into clarity. You do not need to be loud to be strong. You need to wait. You need to watch. And when the time is right, you need to choose yourself. Thomas gave me the tools. I gave myself the courage to use them. And that made all the difference. My life is rebuilt with intention, strength, and independence. I have reclaimed my freedom, dignity, and peace. I wake up every morning without fear, without anxiety, and with gratitude for the lessons I have learned. The world may betray you, family may disappoint you, but patience, observation, and deliberate action will always protect you. Your story is not over. Sometimes the best chapter comes after everything falls apart. And strength often comes quietly, waiting for the perfect moment to be revealed.